Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power. And Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
Indeed, it is the only way to start your day and even the way to end your week. Getting into the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. Tomorrow, something is happening, and let's remind you of what that is, even before we get kicking into our conversation for this hour. Very important to remind you of the Cradle Study Abroad World Fair. It's happening tomorrow. CT, you know what you can find?
Well, what you will find is a lot of information that will, in essence, answer the many questions you'll have. And what are these questions? Okay, how do I choose a university?
Yeah.
How do I know what's useful to me now? If I'm thinking of accommodation, how do I go about it? If I'm looking for a bursary, what do you call a sponsorship?
Scholarship.
How do I go about this? Well, the answer is really very simple. You begin by registering.
Yep.
When you register to Cradle, then you will be invited. When you're invited, there will be experts and representatives from very many universities who will be able to answer almost any question that you may seek to ask.
Fantastic. And they'll all be in one room tomorrow, the 31st of August, at the Gallant Mall in Parklands from 11 to 4 p.m. Universities will be there from very many different countries. You can apply for admission on the spot and actually get your admission tomorrow. You can, find out about the amazing scholarships that are available, about accommodation needs. Even visa people will be there to tell you what you need to do. Like CT said, register on www.cradle.com. Give a call on 0799, that's 0799 000 444. All the information you need. Get registered, get an invite, be there tomorrow. Go in the morning, unsure, leave in the afternoon, sure. All right. So, this morning, we will have a conversation around what has happened in terms of the tenure of Lyn Mengich at the SRC. The chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, Lyn Mengich, is our guest once again this morning. Good morning, Lyn.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I don't like this.
Why?
Because you're leaving.
That's good for me to hear.
I must register that from the very beginning. So maybe that sets the premise then for this conversation.
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of people, it's just one of the things that you expect where, okay, SRC Lyn is there. She's going to be there. So we just keep it moving, right? It's like we don't just continue what you're doing and nobody should bother you. But we look at that. I think it's a little bit more elevated than that, is it not? In terms of the different things that have been done and the milestones that have been reached, and then let's go through some of that today. But it's a pleasure to have you here. You're in the hot seat again, and let's welcome you before we start to turn up the heat a little bit. We'll welcome you the proverb from CT, and it's an interesting one today. I like it very much.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week have been from the People's Republic of Algeria. Interesting country, this one. Very, very interesting indeed. The natives of the country are actually the minority in the country. They are the Berbers. It's written Berber, but it is English, we say Berbers. They comprise them like 20% or 20-25% of the population. The other citizens of that country are actually of Arabic origin. And this country has actually had very many cultures and civilizations crisscrossing it. I mentioned at the beginning of the week, from Phoenicians to the Byzantines to the Romans to the Greeks to the Turks. All these people have at one time or the other claimed. Then, of course, the French came in at the end. Okay? Now, the proverb. Speak kindly or refrain from talking. Speak kindly or refrain from talking.
What do you think about that, Lyn?
Very interesting proverb. I guess in my mind I'm thinking, yes, speak kindly. What does really mean to speak kindly? Because when you say speak kindly or refrain, so what does kindly mean? Does it mean you don't say the truth? Or does it mean I worry about your reactions more than the truth? Or does it mean be kind by telling people the facts and the truth and they deal with it? So what does kindly really mean in this context?
What do you think it means?
I actually think it just means that to be kind means that I tell you the truth, even if it hurts. And that really, it's not about you, it's about the facts, that are placed before you. And then it says, or so be kind or don't speak.
Take for instance, if someone disagrees with you on something which they have a little more knowledge than you do, the option is, what do you use for thinking? Use your brain. Or, I think there may be an alternate perspective on this subject. Perhaps, maybe I could share with you.
Yes, the way you pass the message matters.
Yes,
not just the message.
Yes,
it is the how.
Thank you. Now that is where the consideration comes in.
It is the how.
That's where the kindness comes in.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is getting us into a conversation around where many truths may have been spoken, but maybe they've not been so kind. Many kind things have been spoken, but maybe they were not so true. But if we look at the last 6 years, we're calling this the exit interview because you've decided to speak with us this morning about, okay, it's been 6 years as the chair of the SRC. Let's do an overview. When you took this appointment 6 years ago in 2018, what did you think you were getting into this chair role to achieve?
The good thing is that the Constitution is very clear on what is expected of the Commission, including the role of a chair. So as I took this mandate, what I could see is what is written there, that you've got to worry about the wage bill in Kenya. Is it affordable? Is it fiscally sustainable? It was also very clear that there was a concern by Kenyans on equity and fairness in pay, in remuneration, and that we've got to address it. There were concerns around ability to attract and retain the skills in the public service. There were concerns about performance and productivity. So it was very clear that there were concerns on the wage bill, but beyond the wage bill number itself, but other elements of remuneration. But probably what I didn't realize at that point was, because it's a constitutional mandate, then you expect that all state organs understand it and would then work with you in the journey. But obviously there are people who look at it differently, and striking that balance of the expectation from state officers, from other public officers for increased pay is something that we had to start looking at differently. Because on the surface of it, we should all be walking the same path,
right?
That the wage bill is high. We should all be saying, yes, let's get to where it should be. But I think the reality is a little bit different when you then see that you have to balance the needs of the taxpayers, the needs of the public officers who expect a pay increase, and sometimes ignoring even the economic situation and the realities as they are. Yes.
So the wage bill, would you say that over the last 6 years, the wage bill and the huge responsibility that then you had to make sure that you keep things manageable in the face of, because, really, I don't think there was a time that you had stepped into this position that the economy was doing so well that you didn't have to worry about the wage bill. So was it a continuous monkey on the back of the commission to make sure that you're staying within this huge responsibility?
Absolutely. The entire period as we came in that year, the wage bill to revenue ratio was quite high at 51.5%. And the target is not more than 35%, which is spelled out in the PFM Act. So it actually says not more than.
Yeah.
So as we come in, you can see that the wage bill is way above the target. And at the same time, it was very clear that the expectations from the public officers, both state and non-state officers, was to increase pay. So from the onset, it was very clear that we've got to stay focused. And as you rightly said, just 1 year down the line, COVID-19 struck, right? What happened to the economy? So again, we had to always be on the alert to see where is the economy taking us, and can we afford any increase at all? But at the same time, there is also cost of living is going up.
Yes.
So as the cost of living is going up, employees expect some adjustment. But at the same time, the economy is not doing well. So yes, absolutely, for the entire 6-year period, you've got to be alert. You've got to see what's happening in the environment and ask that question, can the economy afford? Can the taxpayers afford to take this burden at the expense of development and other government priorities?
So when you look at salaries and remuneration, I mean, and it is for government spending, for state officers, for public officers. It is how much they would earn, essentially. What fueled the decisions at any point to either increase or decrease? Because it would seem as if the SRC was there to say, okay, every now let's raise this by 5%. But we did see that during this time, there was often a decrease of how much. Sometimes there was a complete removal of certain things, allowances here and there. What fueled those decisions, and then how would you then make sure that there was a balance?
The first thing that fueled that decision is about affordability and fiscal sustainability of the wage bill. When we talk about fiscal sustainability, we are just simply asking, can the country sustain it going forward? But there is also the question of affordable. Do we actually have the cash to pay? That's affordability. And then the other question which we kept asking is about the equity and fairness in pay, and whether that pay should actually be paid. I'll give you an example. The allowances that you mentioned that we abolished. When we looked at plenary sittings for members of parliament, for MCAs, so you're getting a salary,
Yes.
and you're being paid to do the same work. So that amounts to double compensation. So that is now not about affordable so much, but it's about, is it fair to pay for what looks like double compensation? Because you already have a pay, why should you get a sitting allowance? Or the same way we looked at internal task forces that were formed by different state organs. So you form a task force internally to discharge the very responsibility that you're supposed to discharge. So we have task force committees, internal committees. So again, those we had to abolish. Again, it is that question of, is double compensation? It is not fair. You know, we also had taxable car allowance that used to be paid to cabinet secretaries, permanent secretaries. That again, we abolished for the same reason. And the judges also were part of that. They're also getting that taxable car allowance. Although, of course, that matter went to court. But all that is about not just worrying about the wage bill growth, but it's worrying about the equity and fairness in pay, and whether indeed we can say that the taxpayer should actually shoulder that pay as is. So those are the things we have to keep balancing all through.
As you talk of balancing, just walk us through, one, the mandate of the SRC and the powers that you actually have, or the absence of powers that you actually have, because we sometimes may assume that you're able to do things which you actually cannot do.
That's true. In terms of the mandate is to review, set remuneration and benefit of all state officers.
Review and set.
Yes, for all state officers. Okay. The second mandate says to advise both the national and county government on remuneration and benefit for all other public officers. So other public officers, meaning not state officers. But then the Constitution goes further to spell out the how. So that's the mandate, but it then spells out principles by which we make those decisions. So there are 5 principles, 4 in the Constitution, 1 principle in the SRC Act. In the Constitution, the first principle is that one of the need to ensure affordability, fiscal sustainability of the wage bill. Then the need to ensure attraction and retention of requisite skills to discharge functions of government. The need to recognize performance and productivity. Transparency and fairness. Then in the SRC Act now speaks about equal remuneration for work of equal value. So that also is about equity, but also speaks of fairness. So that spells the how. Now you've asked about, so what are the powers of SRC? What powers do we have? So we do have the power to set to advise, as I've mentioned. But what we don't have is to completely enforce everything the way we would like. So enforcement sometimes is not all of it in our power. The other thing is...
Who shares this power with you? The enforcement?
Okay. Let me give you an example.
Please.
We do carry out monitoring and evaluation.
Yes.
So we might find that we have advised on sitting allowances, right? And you often find in the report of the controller of budget, there will be a report saying that this county assembly or this institution, they have had sitting allowances that is way above, in terms of the amounts, what SRC has advised. So at that point, who then enforces that? Because yes, we have said this is the maximum that you should count sitting allowances, because we put a maximum. But you've gone ahead and gone above that. Or, then who then enforces that? Absolutely. Then that now is no longer within the mandate of SRC to enforce. Okay. So we have set. So that's just one example. And other areas, for example, is when it comes to the wage bill, the drivers of the wage bill are many. Some are within the control of the commission, some are not. So we can control the rate.
Yes.
And we set and we advise. But when we look at what else is actually driving this wage bill, one of the biggest drivers is the numbers. See, that's not within the purview of the commission. So you will find, for example, and you'll see in the wage bill, part of the growth is attributed to employee numbers.
Yes.
Now, those employee numbers, they're not necessarily bad, because, we are a developing country.
Yes.
Our population is growing. So as your population is growing, there are certain services you must, as a government, provide. And education, security, health, you will see growth in those numbers. And we have no problem with those numbers. But sometimes you actually see numbers that are worrying. And we see this especially after every election year in the county governments. When a new administration comes on board, they tend to recruit. And you see some of this recruitment is more political than is required. Yeah. But that decision to hire is not within the purview of the commission. We cannot enforce. That is not our mandate. So that's why I say there are areas we can control the wage bill, and it is within our power. But on the other hand, there are certain drivers that are not really within the absolute control of the commission. Yes.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that, because then you can set and you can recommend. But from what you're saying is that there is, or let me ask, is it then possible for anybody within a seat to then say, yes, SRC has set, it's constitutional, they've recommended, but we're going to put that aside for now and then just go the way we want with an HR function? So even with the set and recommendation, they are bound to follow what SRC is saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That one is absolutely. Once we set, then you must implement. Okay. Once we advise, it is the same. It is binding to the institution. First of all, it is binding to obtain the advice. And then once it is given, then it is also mandatory to comply with that advice.
Have you found that in the last 6 years, Lyn, that there has been a saving, or that there has been then prudent spending when it comes to salaries and remuneration?
Is there prudent spending in this space? I'll say it in two ways. One is we've got concerns on payroll. And you may note that in the last wage bill conference, it was one of the resolutions that as a government, we need to have an integrated payroll system that then allows all players, including the commission, to actually be able to see what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Why is payroll, for example, a concern? Is because, for one, we have payrolls that are manual. And if you have a manual payroll, it is very difficult to control, you know, and they are there.
Yes.
You know, you have manual payrolls or you have multiple. So you have an institution that has both automated payroll. They also have another payroll that is not automated. So the essence of payroll, then I would say, I cannot say absolutely that there is proper utilization of that resource, because we need to have an integrated system where all the payrolls, then we are able, for example, you know, as SRC is able then to go in and see what is happening on the ground. But yes, we have advised. But can we absolutely say everyone is complying to that? Probably not. So that is one of the gaps that we still see in terms of ensuring prudent management of public resources. But if we look at the entire wage bill itself and say, are there loopholes? They will be there as long as we don't have a fully integrated payroll system that enables different institutions to interrogate that payroll properly. Yeah.
Okay. So has there been a saving that has been made?
Yes, we have made savings, a lot of savings. I'll give you an example. Is on an ongoing basis. SRC receives requests, very many requests for different allowances, for pay reviews, and just from 2020 alone, because that is when we began really tracking this, we received requests worth, 150 billion. Just the requests, okay?
Okay.
We approved 46 billion. So you can see, out of that alone, we are able then to release, technically 105 billion. Meaning that if there was no SRC, these institutions could have just spent that money.
The money.
Right? But because there is the commission, they must come to the commission with their proposals. We must then analyze and advise. So you can see that savings. We've also had savings in the allowances that I mentioned earlier that were, that SRC abolished, amounting to over 11 billion. So yes, we've had savings just by SRC prudently looking at the requests that come through and being able to advise on lower amounts than the requests that we receive, abolishing the allowances that we see ought not to be there. So the answer is yes, we've realized the savings worth a lot of billions, 105 and then 11 billion on the allowances, yes.
Okay, let's take a break on that point and then come back, because politics has a lot to play in this. And when you would make a certain pronouncement, when you would say certain things coming from the commission, of course there was hullabaloo all over the place, especially when it came to abolishing of some of these things. And so then to make the separation between what was brick and mortar for the commission in terms of what you're constitutionally mandated to do, and then playing within the politics of the day, where a lot of times those individuals are saying, no, we'll touch everybody, but don't touch us. Let's see how the SRC navigated those waters. We'll come back after the break. We're talking with Lyn Mengich, who is the outgoing chairperson of the SRC. We'll come back after this.